Welcome CSC 200 database class. We're going to be working with a modified version of the Pirates 1982 database, and we're going to start working with a relational database. We're going to add a table, and we're going to make those tables relate to each other, which is basically what makes a relational database. We're going to use something called a foreign key, and we're also going to use central columns, which is why I had a video asking you to import the PHP-myadmin database, because that helps us make foreign columns. And the first thing you'll have to do before you even worry about that is you're going to download the database, and you're going to do that from coursework. And when you go to coursework, you're going to want to find unit 4, and you're going to click on the link to it. And I'm doing this on a Mac right now. And you're going to find the Pirates 1982-pitchers.sql.zip. Now that's going to be zipped when you download it, but then you're going to unzip it when you import it into your PHP-myadmin. So you're going to, now on Windows I mentioned about, just downloading it to your downloads and then extracting it to your folder. So however you want to do that on a Mac, you could probably just control click or right click and do save link as and put it right into your folder. Now I already have one in here, so I'm just going to put it in my notes right now because I have another one in here right now, so I'm just going to save it here. But you should put it in your sample files because you won't have one in there. And on a Mac, when you just double click on it, it'll just unzip in there. There it is right now. That's the one I'm going to be using. It's called Pirates 1982-Pitchers, and you're going to be putting your last name onto that. This is the zip that I put in there, so hopefully it's not, this will be the last stuff with the Pirates I think we use. So this is the one you're going to be importing into your PHP-myadmin. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just go to make sure MAMP's open. I have my server started, and if I go to my open start page, I'll click on my PHP-myadmin, and I'll go into PHP-myadmin. And here's that PHP-myadmin database that I was talking about. Make sure you import that. Also, don't delete it. If it's there, don't delete it and try to import it again, because I had a problem doing that. If you have it there and you brought it in, you're in good shape. That'll help us do something called central columns. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to import. And you could go to databases import. That's probably the best thing to do, is just go to databases first and then go to import. And then you're just going to choose file, and you're going to go find that Pirates Pitchers one. And that's this one right here, Pirates 1982-pitchers.sql. And you're going to import that in. And you shouldn't have to do anything else other than scroll down and hit go. And everything seemed to come in successfully. So there it is over there. There's your Pirates Pitchers database. So when you click on it, you should see there's a table in it called players. We're going to make an addition, and we did make a players table, or we worked on one initially, but we're going to put another table in that database. So one thing I just want to point out about this, I did add another column called POS, and it's actually position, and it actually is an enum, which we'll talk about at some point, but it gives a couple choices of IF, OF, P, and C, which is infield, outfield, pitcher, and catcher. So I just used 4 positions there. So I added another column so that we can basically find where the pitchers are, or else you wouldn't know who the pitchers are. Because what we're going to do to make a relational database is we're going to create another table called pitchers. It's going to be like a subset, almost like a child table of our players, because out of all the players there's going to be pitchers, so we're going to make a pitchers table. So that's one of the things we're going to do in here, just to get started with learning how a relational database works, learning how foreign keys work. And central columns is something we're going to do in PHP-myadmin that's just going to help us kind of copy columns from one table to the other, and we're going to try to do things as efficient as we can. So one of the first things we're going to do, if you have your PHP-myadmin database in there, is we're going to select these columns, just ID first and last, because we're only going to have basically a 4-column table that we're going to make. We're not going to make a huge table for our pitchers, but we're going to select those. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and I'm just going to do something called add to central columns with those 3 things. So your ID, which is the main player ID, first and last name, we're going to say add to central columns. And they're just added. It just says success. You won't see anything special right now. So we're just adding them, so when we create our other table, we'll be able to copy these without having to make them from scratch. We won't have to type them in and put all the varchar. All that will already be done. So we're going to do that when we start to make our table. Now another thing I want to do before we make our table yet is we're just going to browse our players table that we're in right now, and we'll just do a quick SQL query. And what we're going to do is just find how many pitchers out of this list are in there. So it'll give you a chance to just practice your query again. We're going to do a select all from, and we're going from the players because that's the only table we have right now. And we're going to say where, and this is the new column or field that we're using, so I could just click on that, where pause, and I'm going to say equals, and with one quote I'll just put P because that's what I have for a pitcher. So all the pitchers will have position equals P because that's what they have identifying them as a pitcher for their position. So out of all the players on the team, these are just the pitchers. So this is our query to do that. Select all from players where position equals P, and I'll hit go. And I come up with 12 right now. I come up with 12 pitchers out of that group, out of how many I had. I don't know, 28 or something. So they still have their original IDs. So these are all the pitchers. They're not in alphabetical order. They're in order by their ID right now, and that's okay. So I just want you to know that that's what we have right now. We have 12 pitchers. So when we make our new table, we're basically going to pull them out of here. So just so we know how many we have. And we're only going to use ID first and last, and we're going to make a new ID because we're going to make a new primary key for pitchers, because there's going to be a pitcher's ID that's going to be just for the pitchers, but then they're still going to have their original ID of their player ID because that identifies them uniquely for the whole database. So we are going to still have their ID because they're still players. You know, that's the way this is going to be set up. Pitchers is basically going to be like a child table of players because everybody in the pitchers is also going to be a player. That's why they're going to maintain their player ID, but they're also going to have a pitcher ID, and players who are not pitchers won't have a pitcher ID. And that's usually because they have different stats and things like that. But we're not going to do all the stats, but we are going to build that table. And actually, one thing, you can do this at any time, but let's do this now before we even start making our table. Let's go into, on our database, let's change our name of our database. I'll click right on our database name, and I'll go to operations. And it should have a place. We did this initially on one of our other ones, but it gives you a place to change the database name. And I'm just going to put a dash, my last name, at the end. It could be lowercase, but also do this because this will help when you send it back to me to have, the database with your name on it. So make sure you do this before we go any further. You can do that at the beginning or now is fine. So we're going to rename the database. That's all we're going to do, and I'll hit OK. It may not update right away over here, but that's what we want to do. Okay, and since we're at about the 9-minute mark on part 1 of this video, let's take a break here, and then on the next part we'll work on creating our new table and running a query to bring everything into that table. So we'll continue this with part 2.